Outriders is the latest AAA title to arrive on Google Stadia, and today I'm here to answer the question whether or not it's worth picking up. As a quick reminder, all the gameplay you're seeing right now in the background of this video is running off a Stadia instance captured at 4K, and don't worry, I'll try and keep it spoiler free as possible. Most of the gameplay is from very early on in the title. To begin, we're going to be talking about the good, and let me just start by saying that Outriders is a very fun game to play. The only way I could possibly describe this game to you is by calling it fast-paced, action-packed, brutal run-and-gun gameplay that's capable of posing quite a challenge for those seeking it. While the developers behind the game are very adamant to not call it a live service game, it's definitely a looter shooter, but this time the gameplay really stands out in a way that most in its category don't. The game certainly doesn't shy away from making you feel the strength of your character right off the get-go. As soon as you get your abilities, you notice just how strong they are. You'll feel like an absolute monster tearing through wave after wave of enemies, but at the same time you're a bit of a glass cannon, so you can be taken down if you're too careless. Now obviously this all depends on the difficulty you choose to take the missions on at. The game does a good job at dividing that difficulty by world tiers. The higher you go, the harder it gets, but also the better chance for better loot. It's a system that's extremely well implemented, and I personally think it works really well for the type of game it is. At this point, I think you get the picture. They nailed the gameplay, but what else is good? Well, aside from the amount of depth that there is to choose between your abilities and how you customize your character, the whole looting aspect makes this game feel much more like Diablo and less like Destiny. And this really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. People Can Fly, the development studio behind the game, also say that it was largely inspired by the Diablo series. Even when you beat the game and reach the maximum level, you're gonna keep getting stronger and stronger loot. And that's just it. That's the addicting gameplay loop they went after. The endgame is all about just getting better and better loot to synchronize your abilities with your equipment and become an absolutely devastating force. And that may very well be why they don't want to be compared to Destiny or other live service games like it. I can totally see them releasing an expansion with a ton of more legendaries, some more story, and more missions to do. In fact, I'd even argue that introducing seasons like Diablo or PoE would do a lot better for the game than anything else. So when it comes to the good, they nailed the gameplay and they nailed the looting aspect. That's a very strong start for this style of game. But where's the bad? Well, that's where you sacrifice the story. By no means is it the worst thing I've ever played or even a deal breaker by any means. It's just passable at best. Ultimately, it comes down to being a very predictable yet still entertaining storyline. On top of that, the voice acting can be pretty hit or miss, and I'll point to this as a prime example. When I first heard that scream, I bursted out in laughter. It just seems so overdramatic and way overdone. And it's a pretty good example of what you can expect. You're gonna be getting a lot of cheesy dialogue that's fairly generic for this style of game. But to be completely honest, I don't think the story or dialogue are all that important for this game, this style of game in particular. What is important is performance, and sadly, I have to report that the Stadia version of the game suffers in both high frame rate and high resolution mode. When it comes to the resolution mode, it struggles to maintain a locked 30 FPS, and you will encounter dips quite often. And for a fast-paced run-and-gun third-person shooter, it certainly isn't the best way to play the game. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't be so harsh about that because the game does offer a high frame rate mode. It's something I'm a huge advocate for, especially when it comes to cloud gaming. 60 frames per second is very noticeable when gaming locally, but it's even more noticeable when gaming through the cloud. And when it comes to the high frame rate mode on Outriders, well, it does do a lot better than 30 FPS, it certainly isn't a lock 60. With the big problem here being the fact that you can certainly feel it when it does dip. To be clear, it's not unplayable and it won't stop you from enjoying the game itself, but if you do happen to be one of those players that hate frame rates dipping, well, this is certainly a problem here. Myself, the main way I'm gonna be gaming Outriders is gonna be through my PC and GeForce Now because of this. Not to mention, if you have a next-gen console, I've heard performance on there is rock solid, so if you do have that option available, this is something to consider. Another big issue that happens with the Stadia version of the game are the cutscenes themselves. I have absolutely no clue what's causing all the stutter here, but it is kind of jarring and it is a bit annoying to see. That being said, this bad of a stutter only seems to affect cutscenes and cutscenes alone. I've never had this sort of issue with the gameplay other than the frame rate dips I mentioned before. So to wrap it up, let me just answer whether or not Outriders is worth picking up on Google Stadia. For the most part, I'd have to say it depends. The game is fun and it's a really good game. If you enjoy solid gameplay, it's definitely for you. But whether or not you should shell out full price on Stadia really depends in the position you're in. If you happen to have a next-gen console, a gaming PC, or maybe another cloud gaming service that fits your needs, you might want to check it out there first. That being said, if you still decide to pick it up on Stadia, I'm sure you'll get a good time out of it. The game is still extremely enjoyable to play, and while it does suffer a bit on performance, it's not going to stop you from having fun. Either way, that wraps up my impressions on Outriders. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful at all, be sure to hit that like button as it really does help the channel out. And if you're wanting more content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. Today's end of video message is going to be asking you whether or not you've picked up the game, where you've picked it up, and what you think of it so far. Do you agree or disagree with my thoughts on the game? Let me know down in the comment section below, and be sure to share your honest opinion. I always look forward to reading them, whether you agree or disagree with me. As always, thank you for watching the video. This has been the Virtual Cloud, giving you the latest and greatest on everything cloud gaming and VR related. And until next time, I'll catch you in the clouds.